Very good morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning into our webinar on study permit processing during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Shikhir, and I'm the Outreach Officer at IRCC Chandigarh. The target audience for this webinar are students from India who are interested in pursuing a Canadian post-secondary education. Before we begin, please note that the contents of this webinar are valid only as of today. For the most current information on IRCC processes and travel restrictions to Canada, please visit our website www.canada.ca/immigration. So now let's begin. We realize that international students make significant cultural and social contributions to Canada. They also generate more than $21 billion in economic activity. Since the onset of the pandemic, IRCC has implemented a number of temporary policy changes to support and reassure international students and designated learning institutions. The fall 2020 semester has by far the largest student intake throughout the academic year, and this is fast approaching. The most recently implemented measures were introduced on July 14th and are aimed at this upcoming cohort. The changes will continue Canada's reputation as a premier destination for international students, and they will demonstrate the importance of the International Student Program and the contributions international students make to Canada. We strongly encourage students to still consider studying at Canadian institutions, even if many DLIs have moved their fall 2020 semester to an online format. So moving on, our agenda for today will cover the following topics. First is that why you should consider studying in Canada. Second is how the application process works. Then we'll see the restrictions to travel to Canada. Fourth, we'll see the exemptions on those travel restrictions. Fifth are the processing changes due to COVID-19, which include a two-step review process, student direct stream, eligibility to work, authorized leave during studies, and impact on the postgraduate work permit program. Then we'll cover some fraud tips and what you need to know before traveling to Canada. As Anandita mentioned, we will end the presentation with a question and answer session. Please only use the Q&A box to send us a question, and we will go through them after the presentation. Before we get started on some of the changes which have been put in place, let's focus on why you should study in Canada. First, our world-renowned qualifications. Canada is recognized worldwide for the outstanding quality of education institutes. Our educators are highly trained in bringing diverse perspectives to the classroom. At the university level, 2 out of every 5 academics hold at least one international degree, and we have 11 of the top 250 universities worldwide. Then is affordable education. Canada is known for having some of the lowest tuition fee among English-speaking countries. Whatever your budget may be, you'll find something just right for you in our diverse range of education options. Third is safe and multicultural communities. We are proud to say that the warm and friendly stereotype about Canadians is true. When you come to Canada, you will find a welcoming country with a unique Canadian culture that embraces diversity. Last but not the least is a path to a promising future. Canadian colleges and university students graduate with a very strong earning potential. To protect Canadians from the outbreak of COVID-19, the Government of Canada implemented travel restrictions that limit travel to Canada. Until further notice, most foreign nationals cannot travel to Canada even if they have a valid visitor visa or an electronic travel authorization. These restrictions stop non-essential or non-discretionary travel to Canada. In this slide, we'll look at the travel restriction exemptions for students in more detail. Not all students will be able to travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. To be exempt, you must be in possession of either a study permit visa issued on or before March 18, 2020, or a port of entry letter of introduction, which indicates your study permit was approved on or before March 18, 2020. Equally as important, you must also be able to demonstrate that it is essential for you to travel to Canada. For example, you have in-person classes or you are already in the middle of your program of study and need to return to it. You can demonstrate this by providing a recently dated letter from your designated learning institute that explains why you physically need to be in Canada for the fall semester. These documents must be provided to the airline at the time of boarding and to CBSA once you reach a port of entry in Canada. Failure to do this may result in denied boarding for your flight or being forced to return to Canada at your own expense. We will not provide any travel authorization letters for students. All you need to travel is your visa or port of entry introduction letter and evidence of your essential need to travel. It is very important to note that you should not travel to Canada until at most 3 weeks before the start date of your class, for which your physical presence in Canada is required. For those who have already been issued visas for a previous semester but were not able to travel to Canada to attend, please send us a copy of your new letter of acceptance and advise us of your new start date. You can send these documents to us via the IRCC web form. Now let's look at what processing changes have been introduced as a result of the pandemic. Visa application centers, also known as VACs, are currently closed. This means we are unable to accept any paper application submissions. As such, only online submissions are being accepted. On the IRCC website, we normally publish processing times for each of our missions for all our lines of business. Please note that these processing times are no longer accurate as there are processing delays due to reduced staff at the mission. That being said, IRCC is working very hard to process all visa applications in time for the fall 2020 semester. To do this, we need your help by submitting your application as early as possible and submitting all of the required documents as soon as possible. We are aware of many service disruptions that are causing delays in submitting a complete application. For example, we know that VACs remain closed. This means that there is no mechanism to submit biometrics at this time. We also know that panel physicians are operating at limited capacity. This means that it may take longer for you to obtain an appointment to complete your immigration medical exam. We also know that some businesses and schools remain closed or are operating at limited capacity. This means that it may take longer for you to obtain the supporting documents you need for your application. All of that being said, we will not refuse any applications for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. This means you do not have to worry about the deadline specified in the request letters sent to you. However, note that we will not be able to complete the processing of your application until all required and requested documents have been received. So it is in your favor to submit these documents to us as soon as possible. The exceptions to this are the following three documents. You must provide them upfront or your application may be refused. First are the application forms. You do not have an application unless you complete the IRCC forms required. Second is the fee. This includes both the study permit processing fee and the biometrics fee. Third is the letter of acceptance, also known as the LOA, from a designated learning institute or DLI in Canada. This is mandatory for you to submit with your application. Please note that we cannot physically issue any visas until the VACs reopen because we have no mechanism for two-way transmission of passports between you, the client, and us, the visa office. We are, however, attempting to return passports for any existing paper files at the mission, as we realize this is an important identity document for you. Any documents mailed directly to the mission will be returned to the sender. So please do not attempt to send your passports directly to us. Please wait for the VACs to reopen. So I've previously indicated that only those with visas issued on or before March 18th may travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. The recently introduced measures address applications which have not yet received approvals as of March 18th. Here are those measures. First, if your program of study will qualify you for a postgraduate work permit, also known as PGWP, and a part of your course, that is the fall 2020 semester, has been moved to an online format because of the pandemic, the time spent on the online portion while outside of Canada will still count towards time on your PGWP. However, the online portion must be 50% or less of your entire program of study. This means you will still need to complete a minimum half of your program in Canada for all that time to count towards your PGWP. Second is that only online study permit applications will be prioritized. A two-stage approval process will provide some breathing room for students who are not yet able to provide biometrics or medicals. The first stage is the approval in principle, also known as AIP. This is essentially the eligibility assessment of your application. If you receive an AIP approval, your online course time will count towards time for your PGWP. This means you do not have to wait for a visa to be issued. Stage 2 refers to the admissibility and final decisions on your application. In cases of approval, this results in visa issuance. Please also note that an AIP approval is not a guarantee of a visa. Stage 2 includes admissibility decisions. For example, you may be refused a visa despite having an AIP because you have failed your medical exam. Now, this chart explains the process from start to entering Canada. Prior to applying for your study permit, you should carefully research designated learning institutions, decide if you're traveling alone, prepare a budget and proof of funds, gather all important documents. If you want assistance regarding the study permit process, please ensure you seek the help of a certified immigration representative. After you receive your letter of acceptance, you can apply for a study permit. This is where the process has changed a bit and where your decision making process is broken up into two stages. As well, even after being issued a visa, you may still not be able to enter Canada if you are not exempt from the travel restrictions. As you can see, the assessment of your application will be broken up into two stages. Based on the current travel restrictions, even if you're issued a visa, you still will not be able to enter Canada unless you fall under an exemption. So the AIP applies to applications which have not yet received a final decision as of March 18th. It refers to the eligibility assessment of your application. Essentially, it means that even though you are still missing medicals or biometrics, you may still be able to receive an AIP on your application. The criteria for this assessment has not changed, neither the requirements nor how an officer makes that assessment. So here are the criteria. First is that you are a genuine student. This means you have demonstrated the academic and language capability through the submission of your previous academic transcripts and IELTS or TOEFL scores, and that you are able and qualified to complete a program of study in Canada. Second is that you've been accepted by a DLI or a designated learning institute in Canada. This means you have submitted a valid letter of acceptance from a DLI in Canada. Third is that you have sufficient funds to pay for your studies, living expenses, and transportation without working. This means you have submitted financial evidence of liquid funds to pay for these three things for the first year of school and demonstrated via explanation and proof how you intend to pay for these three things, that is tuition, transportation, living expenses, for all the remaining years of studies. Fourth is that you will leave Canada by the end of your authorized stay. This means you have demonstrated through evidence and explanation what your ties are to your home country, which will motivate you to leave Canada once your visa expires. Once you receive AIP in your application, a letter will be sent to you electronically to relay this information to you. You may also receive requests for biometrics and medicals if you have not yet submitted them. This slide provides a list of basic documents required to receive an AIP for the SDS and non-SDS stream. So first, let's look at the SDS list of mandatory documents for the AIP. First, you need a valid letter of acceptance from a DLI in Canada. Second, you need to provide IELTS test results demonstrating 6 in each module. Only in-person tests will be accepted. Please note that we are not accepting online test results. Third, you need to show a receipt or documentation from the DLI that tuition has been paid for the first year. If you also have scholarships or grants, you should also provide documentation to demonstrate this as a part of this requirement. Fourth is to provide a receipt for a GIC for 10,000 Canadian dollars. Fifth is to submit your most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts. And last but not the least, for Quebec-bound students, you need a CAQ. For the non-SDS stream, these are the mandatory documents for AIP. First is to submit a letter of acceptance from a designated learning institute in Canada. Second is to provide IELTS, TOEFL, or PTE test results. Again, no online English language test results will be accepted. Third is to show documentation that demonstrates you have in liquid funds and enough money to pay for tuition, living expenses, and transportation for the first year of school, plus an explanation and evidence of how you intend to pay for all of the remaining subsequent years of school without relying on working in Canada. Fourth, you must submit your most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts. And for Quebec-bound students, you need a CAQ. Additionally, we would recommend you to submit a letter explaining why you choose your program of study. Admissibility assessments are made after AIP and before visa issuance. They include assessments such as medical, criminality, and biometrics, among other things. This means that you must provide biometrics, complete your immigration medical exam, answer all questions truthfully and completely. This includes declaring all previous visa refusals for all countries, providing all of your background history for the last 10 years, and being truthful about any previous arrests and criminal history. And you must always submit only authentic documents. It is important to note that the required documents to submit under SDS has not changed. We realize that due to service disruptions, you may not be able to submit all of the required documents to qualify under the stream. Examples of this may be upfront medicals, IELTS results, GIC, etc. If you're unable to submit a required document, for example, upfront medicals, your application will be moved to the non-SDS stream. Many of you will have questions about working in Canada and how the changes may affect your opportunity to be employed. So why is the postgraduate work permit or PGWP important for many students? Work experience provides a better opportunity to gain the language skills and work experience required in Canada. As well, Canada has some of the highest salary for workers. Additionally, if you decide to return to your home country or work in another country, people who gain Canadian work experience are often able to demonstrate that they have the skills, knowledge, and critical thinking required to do the job. It is worth noting that to obtain a 3-year postgraduate work permit, the applicant must have completed a minimum of 2 years of post-secondary studies in an eligible program. You can complete more than one program and combine their length to determine your PGWP length, but in that situation, each program has to be PGWP eligible, including being at least 8 months in length. So this section applies to students who are already in Canada. Essentially, if a student switched to part-time studies or had to take a break in studies, for example, the spring-summer semester may have been cancelled due to the pandemic, they may still continue to work on and off campus, provided that they were previously a full-time student and already authorized to work on or off campus pre-pandemic. For off-campus work, the maximum limit is still 20 hours per week during the academic session and full-time during regular academic breaks. For those who are not yet in Canada, a common question we are asked is if you can go to Canada and work those maximum 20 hours per week while taking online classes for the fall semester. The short answer to this is no. I would like to remind you of what we discussed in the earlier slides regarding what students need to demonstrate in order to travel to Canada. Unless your physical presence is required for your studies in the fall semester, it is not essential for you to travel to Canada at this time. Additionally, only students with visas issued on or before March 18, 2020 can travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. So we have heard your concerns about having to pause mid-studies for one-year programs so you do not exceed the maximum allowable time on online studies outside of Canada in order for the entire program to count towards your PGWP. We are pleased to introduce new measures to address this. Here are the latest changes. If you're unable to travel to Canada at this time due to travel restrictions, your eligible online studies will count towards your PGWP if you already have a study permit, or you have been approved for a study permit, or you will apply for a study permit before beginning of your studies in January 2021. If you fall in any of the situations listed above, you can complete up to 100% of your program online while outside of Canada if your program is between 8 and 12 months in length and you started your program of study between May and September 2020. This essentially means that taking an entire one-year program online outside of Canada may qualify the entire program for a PGWP. If you can complete up to 50% of your program online up until April 30, 2021, while outside Canada, if you also eventually complete at least 50% of a program in Canada. Additionally, you can complete up to 50% of a program online up until April 30, 2021, while outside Canada if you graduate from two different programs within 2 years of each other, and each program is at least 8 months in length, and at least one of the programs started between May and September 2020, and at least 50% of the combined programs is completed in Canada. This means that you could potentially complete a one-year program outside of Canada and then take another one-year program in Canada, and both programs will give you the maximum allowable time towards your postgraduate work permit. If you decide to study and work in Canada, you may then decide to make Canada your permanent home. To begin the process of applying for permanent residence in Canada, you must submit your profile in the Express Entry online system. This will show you how many comprehensive ranking points you have based on your education, your work experience, language ability, and other factors. On a regular basis, IRCC invites the candidates with the most points in the express entry pool to apply for permanent residence through one of the federal economic immigration programs. If you're invited to apply for permanent residence, your invitation will tell you which program you need to apply through and will have 60 days to submit your application. There are other options to apply to immigrate permanently as a worker outside of the express entry system. Some examples include the Provincial Nominee Program and the Atlantic Immigration Pilot. Now let's look at the conditions by which you must abide before air travel to Canada. The airline will require the following documents from you. First is your passport. Second is a valid study permit visa or a port of entry introduction letter issued on or before March 18th, and documents to demonstrate that your travel to Canada is essential. Failure to provide any of these documents may result in your being denied boarding. Additionally, you will be required to pass a health check performed by the airline officials just before your flight. If you're showing any COVID-19 symptoms, you may also be denied boarding. If you're approved for boarding, note that you must wear a non-medical mask or face covering upon arrival in Canada. All travelers must undergo a health check upon arrival in Canada. It is also mandatory that all passengers arriving in Canada must self-quarantine for 14 days. This means that all travelers must, number one, have a plan to self-quarantine for 14 days, confirm and provide evidence that they have a suitable place to quarantine. This means providing an address and explaining how they intend to self-quarantine if other people live at the same location. Third is to explain how you intend to respect that quarantine plan. For example, explain how you intend to receive essential items such as food. Please do not travel to Canada unless you have a viable quarantine plan. Failure to comply has consequences, which include a fine up to 750,000 Canadian dollars, 6 months in prison, or being deemed inadmissible, removed from Canada, and banned from entering Canada for 1 year. In this section, we want to inform you of various fraud activities and misinformation related to immigration applications. You may scan the QR code on the screen as I speak. First, it is very important to protect yourself. We always say that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You should never share your personal information with unauthorized agents. You should also never believe any claims guaranteeing you a visa. Each application is assessed on its own merit by a migration officer. Then there are fraudulent websites and scams. Websites and social media accounts may claim to be from the Government of Canada. Applicants are tricked into transferring money for services that will never be provided to them. Please note, our official website is www.canada.ca/immigration. Then there are email scams. Please note that IRCC will never send you an email from a personal address like Hotmail or Gmail. Then we have telephone scams. IRCC will never ask you for any sort of payment by telephone. Then there are unauthorized agents. Examples of authorized agents include members of law societies in Canada, members of Chambre de Notaire in Quebec, and members of ICCRC, which is a regulatory body for immigration consultants in Canada. We always say that you do not have to use an agent to submit an application, but if you choose to use one, please make sure that they are legally authorized to represent you. You may visit our website for more information. With respect to agents, we understand that many schools use education agents to recruit students. This is perfectly acceptable as long as their activities are restricted to recruitment. This means that they should not be providing any immigration services or advice unless they are also an authorized agent. In this slide, you can find the many ways to connect with us and to find out more information. You can see the website for the Immigration, Refugee and Citizenships Canada. You can see the website for the High Commission of Canada in India. You can also see on the screen the Facebook and Twitter handles for Canada in India, and also the link to our YouTube channel where you can find important information and a lot of fraud tips. You can scan the QR code on the screen as I speak for more information. So this brings us to the end of our presentation. I would now invite Anandita to answer the questions which you have typed in the Q&A box. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakil. Hello, everyone. My name is Anandita Burakohai, and I'm the Outreach Officer for IRCC Delhi. Before I start addressing your questions, I would like to comment upon something which is coming up which has been typed in by a lot of people who have joined the webinar today. We understand your concern about not getting any updated information, or should I say, not getting any revised information with regards to lifting of travel restrictions or VAC openings. So the comments coming in, those types of comments coming in, I understand that they are coming in from people who have already joined our webinar this month. Please note that our webinars are done weekly so as to provide information to people who actually need it at this point in time. So if you feel you have joined a webinar earlier this month, then yes, you might not find any new information, because as you might have been scanning our social media pages, there has not been any changes to the current travel restrictions, which are still in place till September 30th. So just to say, we understand your frustration and we understand the obstacles that you're facing while having to study from here in India or your home country. But please do understand that we are trying our level best to provide you with all the updated information. So if you find this information repetitive, then yeah, it might be the case because the information that we are providing today has not changed since the first week of September. So apologies in advance for that. And with that, I would now like to address a couple of, not a couple, a few queries which have been coming in very frequently in the Q&A chat box. So one of the first questions which is being asked is, How do I demonstrate that my travel to Canada is essential if I have never lived in Canada? So for this, you have to consult with your designated learning institution to determine if your entry into Canada is essential. If your entry into Canada is essential, the institution should provide you with a letter clearly outlining why you must be in Canada. Neither IRCC nor the High Commission provides any travel authorization letters for students. Now, the next question that we have is, what if my DLI does not provide online courses and requires me to be in Canada, but I received my approval after March 18th, 2020? In this case, you will not be able to travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions, even if your DLI requires you to be in Canada. In this case, sorry, uh, I'm sorry, uh, in this case, you should consider deferring your studies. The next question is, can I still go to Canada and work 20 hours a week off campus if my classes are online? So the short answer to this is no. If your classes are online, you would not have an essential reason to travel to Canada, as Shikhar mentioned in his presentation, and hence the working of 20 hours a week off campus doesn't apply in your situation. The next question is, I was not allowed to board the aircraft leaving for Canada even though I have a valid study permit issued before March 19th. What should I do? The final determination to allow a traveler to board an aircraft is made by the airline, often in consultation with the Canada Border Services Agency. It is your responsibility to have documentation that clearly shows that your travel to Canada is essential. The next question is regarding the two-stage assessment process which is currently in place. So the question is, the letter of acceptance for a designated learning institution in Canada, is the two-stage process available for winter 2021 start dates? So I can see that this question has come in from a lot of people who are planning to start their studies in the winter of 2021. So the answer for this is that the two-stage process does not apply to you, and it will only be for programs that start or have started in the spring, summer, or fall of 2020. The next question is, people want to know what an officer looks for when considering the review of an application to grant or deny an approval in principle. So the officer weighs factors including if you or your family are established in your home country. An example of this could be a stable employment with a good salary. Does your course of studies make sense? You should be able to explain why you chose this course of studies. Do you have sufficient language skills to show that you are able to succeed in your studies in Canada? Do you have sufficient funds to pay for your studies and living expenses without relying on working in Canada? And do you have a valid letter of acceptance from a DLI? This is a very important thing. Coming to questions received regarding SDS and non-SDS documentation submission. So though Shikhar had mentioned this during his presentation, but I'll just quickly take you through this one more time because I see that a lot of questions are coming in, especially with regard to language tests. So the documents that you need for an SDS would be a letter of acceptance from a DLI, IELTS test results demonstrating a 6.0 in each band, tuition fee paid for the first year, a guaranteed investment certificate for 10,000 Canadian dollars, your most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts, and a certificate of acceptance or CAQ for Quebec-bound students. Now, for non-SDS applications, what we require is a letter of acceptance from a DLI, an IELTS, TOEFL, or PTE test results. So yes, language tests are mandatory even for non-SDS applications. Evidence of financial ability to pay for tuition, transportation, and living expenses, your most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts, and again, a certificate of acceptance if you are a Quebec-bound student. The next question is, what do I do if I cannot submit a document within the requested time frame? Given the current situation, IRCC will not refuse any applications for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. Please submit the requested documents as soon as you are able to, even if the deadline for submission has elapsed. However, note that we will not be able to complete the processing of your application until all required and requested documents have been received. A very good question, and which might be helpful for a lot of you. How will I know if an approval in principle has been granted to me? So, a letter confirming your stage one approval will actually be sent to your online account, which means that you need to constantly monitor and keep tracking your online account or My CIC account. The letter may request you to complete the rest of your requirements, for example, your biometrics and your medicals, if you have not already done so. And you need to do them as soon as you are able to go and submit your biometrics or go and get your medicals done. If I'm granted an AIP, can I assume that once I complete my biometrics and medicals, I will get a student visa? So the answer to this is no. An approval in principle is not the same thing as being granted a visa. So please be very clear about the distinction. The officer will still need to establish that you meet admissibility requirements. And these are the requirements which Shikir had shared during his presentation. Note that a stage 2 refusal is uncommon provided that you are truthful in your application, that you have not provided any fraudulent documents in your application, and that you comply with all additional requests immediately. The next question is, I have submitted all the required documentation for the second stage approval during my first application itself. Will I receive just a stage one approval in principle or a stage two approval? I have seen different versions of these questions in the Q&A chat box. So people who had submitted their applications with their biometrics and medicals have also received or will receive an AIP. So what is the situation like in that case? In order to give assurance to students wanting to start their online courses in the fall, cases are being prioritized to provide approval in principle. The mission will prioritize stage 2 decision making in line with visa application centers in India reopening and how Canadian institutions are offering instructions online versus in person and travel restrictions for students which are being revised currently. Um, the next question is also coming in a lot because we understand that classes have started for a lot of students. So the question is, what if my schooling starts prior to me receiving my stage one or approval in principle? So the answer to this is that you can start school online prior to obtaining your AIP. If you receive AIP after your school started, all the time will still count towards your PGWP or post-graduation work permit, provided that you submitted your study permit application before September 15th. So you have to remember when you submitted your application because it will make a difference to your eligibility for your PGWP. Um, the next question is, of course, about processing. We're receiving a lot of questions regarding processing times. Is processing for SDS study permit applications faster than non-SDS applications? There have been many service disruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have not been able to maintain our standard processing times. We are working through our inventory of applications now. Note that IRCC will not refuse applications for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. However, if you are not able to submit requested documents in a timely manner, we will not be able to complete the processing of your application until all required and requested documents have been received. The next question, different versions of this have come in, but the basic one is that when can I expect a decision on my application? So there have been, like, again, to reiterate that there have been many service disruptions due to COVID-19. So our processing times are no longer accurate. We are working hard towards normal service delivery standards. Applications meriting a refusal are being finalized at this time. Please check your online account or email in case you may have received a refusal letter. For applications to receive a visa approval, these will not be finalized until visa application centers can reopen. Coming to a topic which is coming up a lot in the Q&A box, language tests. So people are asking if they can submit a language proficiency test result that they have completed online. And what if their school has accepted that same online test result? Will that be sufficient? So the answer to this is that IRCC does not accept results from online language tests. There are no changes to the language proficiency assessment score requirement. The recommended tests are IELTS and TEF or TCF for French. Test scores from tests like Duolingo or any other language test will not be accepted for any immigration application purposes, including for study permits. The next question is something which might be helpful for a lot of you. What if my IELTS score is expired or is about to expire by the time I get a decision on my application? So we will accept the IELTS results as long as they were valid on the day you submitted your application. So even if they get expired in the process of us reviewing your application, we will still be accepting those same test scores. The next question is about PTE tests. Does IRCC accept PTE language scores as proof of language ability for a study permit application? It is recommended that you submit language scores which are indicated on the IRCC website. You can go and have a look at which are these tests. However, if you have completed a PTE language test, you may submit your scores to IRCC using the PTE portal. Do not include your username and password in your study permit application. The next set of questions, I'll be addressing a topic which is probably valid for a few of you considering the given situation about deferring studies. So the person is asking, my application is still pending. What will happen if I defer my studies to a later semester? So if you choose to defer your studies, ensure that you submit a new letter of acceptance using the web form as soon as possible so we can update your file. The next question is, I received an approval of my study permit, but I have already deferred my studies. So in this case, how do I extend my visa? You will need to apply for a new study permit with updated information. Extensions of study permits are only granted to students already in Canada. And since most of you are not there right now and are in your home country, instead of an extension, you will have to apply for a new study permit. The next set of questions will be addressing your queries regarding PGWP. So the question is, I have already completed 50% of my programs online prior to the fall semester. Can I still obtain a PGWP? So the answer, which Shakir had also shared during his presentation, and I will be sharing with you again, is that you can complete 100% of your program online if your program is between 8 and 12 months in length, and you started your studies between May and September of 2020. You can complete up to 50% of your program online until April 30th, 2021 if you complete the other 50% of your program in Canada, or you can complete up to 50% of your studies online until April 30th, 2021 if you will graduate from two different eligible study programs within 2 years of each other. If one of the programs started between May and September 2020, if each of the programs is at least 8 months in length, and if you complete at least 50% of the combined length of the programs in Canada. The next question is, can I switch from a full-time to part-time studies, and will this affect the duration of my PGWP? For the fall 2020 semester, you must be enrolled for a full-time studies for that time to count towards a PGWP. So even if you are right now taking classes from home, which are online classes, you will still be eligible for a PGWP if the course that you had enrolled for was originally a full-time in-class physical course and not a blended course or not an online course right from the beginning. For winter, spring, and summer 2020 semesters, the duration of your PGWP will not be affected if you become a part-time student because your DLI cancelled or delayed classes due to public health measures. And now I'll address just a couple of questions regarding accompanying dependents for those of you who do have people planning to travel with you. So the question is, I submitted an application for my dependents along with my study permit application. Will they be processed at the same time? The answer is yes. Applications for spouse and children or just a child of prospective students will be processed at the same time. You must provide financial documentation to show how you will be able to support your dependents without working in Canada. But you also have to keep in mind the current processing times, we have repeatedly been saying have been affected due to the pandemic. So considering that if your applications are slightly getting delayed, you please also accept a delay in the application review of your accompanying dependents, whether it is your spouse or your children. The next question is, can my dependents travel with me to Canada if they have temporary resident visas and I have a study permit? So, to be exempt from the travel restrictions, temporary resident visa holders who are immediate family members of study permit holders require a letter of authorization from IRCC in order to travel to Canada. A request for an authorization to travel can be made by sending an email to an email address. That email address I will be sharing with you in the Q&A box right after I address this query. The following information should be contained in that email that you write to us. Documentation showing that they are an immediate family member of a study permit holder, why they need to travel, and what is the essential purpose of their travel, their file number, name, and date of birth. So with that, I have come to the end of the most generic questions that we have received in our Q&A chat box. I will now turn this over to Ms. Jackie McLean, who is the manager of our client service and exceptional cases unit, and also to Shakir, who will be addressing a few queries which seem to be very specific but also very pertinent given the current situation. So over to you, Jackie and Shakir.
Thanks, Anandita. So Jackie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks. So Jackie, I think Anandita has addressed a lot of the questions by the participants already. Just some of the questions we are getting from a lot of people. So the first question is that when can we expect the wax to be opened?
I know that there's a lot of people that are very concerned about that. And for students, I want to say that at this time, regardless if the VAC is open or not, the travel restrictions remain in place. And that is that you cannot travel to Canada at this time, regardless if you have a visa, unless you meet the travel exemptions. So those students that meet the travel exemptions, again, are those students that were issued a study permit on or before March 18th and have a non-discretionary purpose of being in Canada, like your courses are being held in person or you have labs, those types of things, and in which case you have to get a letter from your designated learning institution. So I know that there's a lot of anxiety over the VAX reopening, but at this time, even if the VAX were to reopen, um, you would not be able to travel to Canada. So the other thing that I wanted to alert people to is we are receiving a lot of passports at the High Commission, people that are sending in their passports. It's taking us we're working with reduced staff during this time, and it does take a lot of resources to be able to obtain those passports and then have to mail them back to you because we're not accepting passports at the High Commission at this time. So please do not mail your passport to our office. As well, if and when we will be accepting passports, it may not be that the VAX will reopen in a way that we are back to our full services, where we will accept biometric enrollment, accept paper applications, accept passport submissions. We are working in a new world. We've heard this term, a lot, and we have to think about the health and safety of our clients and of the staff at the High Commission and the VAC. And therefore, we will be looking at how best to um, be able to obtain passports from clients, whether that be via courier option versus in person. So do make sure that you keep informed by following us on social media, and we will provide very, very clear instructions regarding how we are going to move forward with this. And we will be prioritizing based on people that are currently exempt from the travel restrictions. Over to
Thanks,
you, Bill.
Jackie. Thanks, Jackie, for the clarification. So another question which a lot of participants are asking is that they've applied for a study permit for the January 2021 intake. They need clarification as to how their application would be considered, whether it is a two-stage approval process or a full approval. They say that most of them only have biometrics pending in their application.
So, as stated earlier, if you have admission to the winter session, this is not at this time the approval in principle, the two-stage process has not been extended to the winter session. This may change, but at this time it has not been. So we're all kind of wondering how what's going to evolve, and that may change. But at this time, what we're focusing on is approval and principles for applicants that have registered for the fall semester, because not everybody has received their approval in principle yet. Once we have dealt with those applications, then we will prioritize applicants that have registered for the winter session. Over.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question, which we could take, is that I have submitted my full file before the pandemic. That is on 3rd of March 2020. I submitted a complete file with medical exam and biometrics. So why am I getting an AIP letter now instead of a full approval?
So it was submitted, I'm sorry, it was submitted before March 18th?
That's right.
So I think what you should do is lodge a web form, because once prior to March 18th, we do look at them a little bit differently, because you can travel to Canada if you have been issued it prior to March. Actually, you know what? Let me rephrase
Actually,
that. So
yeah,
he submitted it, but he or she submitted it, but didn't receive their approval.
that's
So,
right.
okay, sorry. So because there was not approval prior to that date, it would be part of the two-stage process.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that my biometrics instruction letter will expire soon. So do I have to inform IRCC about it, or will it get extended automatically?
So all of our instructions on our website, and through many of the posts that we have done on our Facebook, very clearly indicate that the biometric letter, because it is an automated letter, will be for requesting you complete biometrics within 30 to 90 days. This has been extended until the visa application centers have reopened. So you will not be receiving a new letter, but you will have time to take your letter and present it to the visa application center once it reopens for biometrics. Over.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that I'm currently in the United States and my entire application has been submitted for study permit in September intake with all documents and biometrics. The wax in US, the participant says, are open. I have received the phase 1 approval. When can I expect the phase 2 approval?
So because of the fact that the travel exemptions are still in place for students, right now we are prioritizing the approval in principle, because most institutions, even if you are in Canada, the classes are all online. So I would imagine that we will continue to prioritize the approval in principle stage before the stage 2 approvals, knowing that at this time it really does not change things for the student, because they will have to continue to do their studies online, regardless if you're in the United States, Europe, India. The travel restrictions remain the same for all students.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is also a query we're getting a lot of from a lot of people. They say that if we opt for online studies from January 2021 and we work full time while in India doing our online studies, will it impact their express entry points since their full time working hours would overlap with their full time online studies?
So for express entry application, every application is different. It depends on the amount of points. It depends on the amount of studies. So I'm reluctant to comment on specifically specifically, an express entry application that has a person that's studying and working full time. But what we would normally encourage people to do is focus on their studies and ensure that they, ensure they keep up their marks. If you're able to do that and work full time, go ahead and do that as well. We will consider it in your application. Um, there's, it's just, whether or not the officer is satisfied that you would be able to do that. Can you study full time and apply yourself and get the marks required to be a genuine student and continue to work full time? Over.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that what happens to the biometric fee if my study permit gets refused? Since WACs are now closed and we could not do our biometrics, will we get a refund in this case if a study permit gets refused?
That's a good question. So normally we would not be refusing an application because we don't consider it a complete application until the fees have been paid. Um, you know what? I'm going to have to get back to you on that one because I don't have an answer as to whether or not you would be eligible for a refund. So what I will do is commit to posting that on our Facebook page with an answer.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is if you could please give us a glimpse of the time that it will take to process biometrics and to receive an approval whenever WACS will open, considering the huge amount of pendency.
I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. But I think a lot will depend on the travel restrictions. So if the travel restrictions allow for students to enter Canada, we would probably make that a priority. We would probably look at extending VAC hours. We'd have to also look at like other areas who have reopened the VACs as to how many clients can come in at one time. So we know that international students make a huge commitment to doing this by paying their tuition fees, committing to being in Canada. And so we are doing whatever we can in order to facilitate that. So we're looking at all types of options at this point in time. And if they are able to travel to Canada, absolutely we'll look at all different options in order to get as many students in and have their biometrics completed as soon as possible.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is what if my medicals expire before entering Canada?
So this is a good question because it's one that normally once you're issued your approval, you enter Canada, and so it's reasonable that once you've entered Canada, um, then your medical doesn't normally expire. But these are, special times, and for that reason, we have issued visas for the duration of your course, and we're not canceling those visas. So you can enter Canada as long as your visa is valid, regardless if you have to had to have remained in India um, beyond the 1 year mark of when you completed your medical.
All right, thanks. Jackie, so the next question is that I have heard that study permits are getting rejected on the grounds that the officer was not convinced that a person would leave Canada after their studies. What can a person or an applicant show in their application to make their case stronger and to avoid such a refusal?
Okay, so Anandita covered that in the frequently asked question. It is obviously the reason for refusal for most students is that the officer isn't satisfied that should the student be requested to leave Canada, they would do so. And so what would make a student remain in Canada and not return to their home country? And that would be that they don't have strong economic or family ties. And given that, we're dealing with the student cohort, a lot of them don't, they're not married, they don't have children that are staying behind. So primarily what the officer would be looking at is their economic ties. So what are, especially when you're young, you're 20, 21, 22 years old, and you're going to Canada to study, what would be strong economic ties, considering you probably haven't worked, you're probably not established? We would look at the person that's funding your studies, which is primarily your family. What is their level of establishment in their home country? So, example of that would be that they had long-term jobs where they have, a relatively strong income. Travel history shows that you have traveled to other countries and returned to India. In other words, you've abided by the conditions of another country. So travel history is always a good thing to show, particularly if you've traveled to the United States or Canada in the past. And then outside of having economic or job ties, or family that has job ties, what would be your ability to come back to India and obtain employment and be able to have a relatively good lifestyle? So, do you have a good job prospect back in India, so that there wouldn't be a strong draw for you to remain in Canada? Um, a lot of times people will show financial information that can be difficult for somebody that isn't of, well, even if you have the India financial background, it's difficult because a lot of times property is divided, between multiple family members, and it's not clear whether or not that financial information would be available to the student. So that's why we really strongly encourage the GIC. It's like, we know it's there, we know it's available to the student, and we know that they can access it, as well as tuition paid. So those things I would strongly recommend. Otherwise, it's really difficult for the officer to say, oh yeah, I know that money will be available for the student. But if they know the tuition has been paid and they know that there's a GIC, it's easier and more tangible for the officer to look at that and say, okay, I'm satisfied that the requirements have met and that student would leave Canada. And because they can pay for their studies, they have those funds available to them. Over.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that my visa expired in India without having used it at all. I have submitted another application, so will I get an AIP now or a visa?
So again, we are prioritizing approval in principle so that that student would be able to have some assurance that they can start their courses online. That's the reason why we're doing it. And so I would say all students at this point in time, regardless of your situation, we want to get that approval in principle to you first. Over.
Thanks, Jackie. So I think maybe we could take one more question. So this question is that my program length is 16 months without breaks, with an internship of 4 months. Now, does the 50% PGWP rule, is it based on the length of the program? That is, if I study for 8 months in my home country and next 8 months in Canada, does it qualify for PGWP?
So specific ones like this, I'm always hesitant to comment on. What I would strongly suggest that you do is go to our website where it indicates the PGWP. They have changed it. So before, it used to be, 50% of your classes that's not just like, I don't want to comment, yes, 8 months, because it depends on your caseload and your class load. So make particular attention to that. So if your first 8 months was you had more classes online than you did have in classes for the last 8 months in Canada, that could affect your PGWP. But as well, they made amendments for students that were short courses, um, that to complete their entire studies online and still be eligible for a PGWP. So please go to our website, search students and then PGWP, and it will give you the list of how it's going to be applied for a postgraduate work permit.
All right, Jackie. So maybe we could take one more question. It says that I have received an AIP for the January 2021 intake, and that AIP was received from an email ID called cpcvxtcom@cic.gc.ca. But neither IRCC nor Canada and India has announced that AIPs will be issued for the January 2021 intake. Is the AIP valid or was it sent by mistake? So I'm presuming this could be a fraud case, Jackie.
I'm presuming it is too. And, you know, I have seen so many emails and so many people mailing in our passports because they are, what's happening is the fraudsters are using the Delhi immigration gc.ca email. It's not actually our email address, but they're putting it in the name so it looks like it's coming from us. So it's very difficult for them, very difficult for the client to be able to differentiate. The fraudsters are getting very good at this. So what we're going to try and do is do more posts on our Facebook page regarding if you get a letter, say from Eric Woodward, or if you get some of these imposters' names, or if be aware of this email ID so that hopefully people will not be defrauded out of thousands and thousands of dollars thinking that they're getting a visa to go to Canada. The other thing that I would strongly recommend is if you are not doing your application yourself. So if you go online, do it yourself, you know that you've submitted it online to us. However, if you are using a rep, you have to check to make sure that that rep is authorized. Otherwise, you have no way to get that money back. You have to submit, go to the local police and hope that they are able to prosecute the person. But even if they do, you're probably going to get a portion of your money back. So go on to the IRCC website or check the lawyers in Canada by verifying that they are authorized. Then if your authorized rep does something that is inappropriate, we will investigate it. We will look at whether or not we can process your application because the rep acted in an inappropriate or non-authentic way. So please, please, please pay attention to the fraudsters.
Thanks, Jackie. So maybe we could take one more question, which could potentially be fraud. Maybe in this case it is not, but it says that my AIP was sent in my email, but there is no update in the GC key. Is that a genuine AIP?
So usually we're trying to send that in the GC key, but it's particularly if your application was submitted on paper. When you submit your application on paper, if you have provided an email address, we will use that email address for all correspondence afterwards. A lot of people don't know that. They think that it's going to come through the VAC. So even if you were refused an application, we will send your refusal letter using your email address. It's only if you did not indicate an email address, and that's only probably 15% of our clients. So by far, the majority of our clients will receive a message on their email account. So what I would suggest that you do is if you receive the approval in principle, and it's not showing at your GC keys, you can submit through our online help. There's a way to do through technical support to say, how come this isn't showing up on my GC keys? And then you should get a response to see why that isn't showing up. Perhaps it's because you didn't link your application properly. Perhaps there's something in the way that the transmission went through. But go on to our online help and submit through the web form the fact that you're having technical problems. However, if you did have that paper application, you would have received an email from us indicating your AIP.
Thanks, Jackie. So with that, I think we've pretty much covered all the questions for today. Would you like to give some closing remarks before we end the webinar?
Yes, I have been looking at a lot of your comments, and I do sense the frustration that the students are having. I understand you have invested a lot of money, you and your family. You had the desire and the thinking that you would be in Canada at this time. Um, Things have been turned upside down for a lot of us, and I think it's just really important to how we cope during this time. And online, although like my children are doing online in India right now, it's not ideal. But we need to we need to try and make it through this and cope as best as possible, so that we can come through it. You can move to Canada, you can complete your studies, you can get a postgraduate work permit. Hopefully, the pandemic probably is not going away anytime soon. So we have to figure out ways to cope, and if the travel restrictions are not lifted in the near future, we're going to have to continue to look at ways to cope with this. So I know that they are reviewing different things in Canada regarding how institutions can reopen. Make sure that you talk to your DLI about that. What are the chances that you will be providing online classes, or sorry, in-person classes? If they're not going to be online for the January session, what are the chances that you should go to Canada at that point in time? So I think the key message for everyone is just to please bear with us during this time. We are trying very hard to action as many requests as possible, despite many of us working from home, not having the same bandwidth, not being able to you know, uh, be able to access the documents that we were able to do when we were able to accept paper applications and work in the office. So bear with us, and we will endeavor going forward to continue our webinars and continue updating the information. Right now, because the travel restrictions have not changed, we have provided the same webinar. When and if they have changed, we will definitely be updating you and providing you with new information. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. That brings us to the end of the webinar. We hope that we were able to provide you with some useful information, and we were able to answer your queries. Before we end, I would request you all to please keep following us on our social media platforms so that you get the latest and updated information with regards to study permit processing as well as the travel restrictions to Canada. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we hope that all your queries are addressed very soon. Thank you.